Thank you so much for coming out today for this very important announcement. Excited to be here and talk a little bit about what we've done, and then we'll also answer your questions here at the end. I'm a big believer that government should work to solve problems, but as most of you here in the media know, that's not always necessarily the way that works here in Harrisburg. Whenever I ran for office, I came here to fix problems, and I was prepared to take on tough issues where there are systems that have been broken and people that are being treated unfairly. This issue, as we're talking about with the PIAA reform, it's been talked about for a long time. Parents, coaches, administrators, school boards, student athletes, they've been talking about this ever since I can remember when I was in junior high and in high school. And we brought a group of people together. And when we sat down with the original folks who we sat down with, the people that are here behind me, who I'll introduce here in just a moment, there was many discussion that we could not come to a final resolution. I think that I was surprised, and many other people were surprised, that when we sat down and had our initial conversations, there were so many more things that brought us together and that we agreed on, and actually very few things that we disagreed on. We spent the last year working together, putting students first. And each of the people behind me that represent folks from public schools and private schools have always put students first as we've worked through this. Before we get into the details of the legislation, and I turn it over to some of my friends who we've worked with on this issue, I want to thank some people. First and foremost, Eric Failing is behind me here from the Pennsylvania Catholic Conference. Also, Sean McAleer, who's not able to be here today, the Director of Education from the PA Catholic Conference, has been instrumental in this work. The Pennsylvania Equity Steering Committee, which represents the public schools across the entire Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, specifically as it deals with the PIAA issues. And that is Bill Hall. Bill's this way, sorry. And Len Rich, who's actually from right next to where my district is at Laurel High School as well. My team, and I have a great team that has worked on this. This isn't just the four of us on the stage that have worked on this, but I have a great team of folks. Nick Karen is my chief of staff here in the back, who just does an exceptional job, not only on this legislation, but so many other things, as well as our communications coordinator. Abby Haslam has been instrumental, especially in setting this up for having everybody here today. Our leadership team in the House of Representatives, led by Kurt Sonny, the chairman of the Education Committee, and his entire research staff, particularly Elena Koltash, has been very helpful in this, as well as Leader Cutler and his staff, with Jeremy Keel leading the floor. Really, this is about a group of people and a team that have had great relationships that have come together to build what we've done and what we're unveiling today. I thank you so much for working together on this. And for those people, they've never given up hope that there's the opportunity to come to a good, strong resolution that benefits everybody. So we've reached a solution, and that solution is the Parity and Interscholastic Athletics Act. It'll be as House Bill 1600, as you can see in your packets, and it'll be introduced later today. This bill is equally centered and focuses on students and student athletes from private and public schools across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. This impacts hundreds of thousands of students, what we're talking about today. House Bill 1600 creates a separate playoff brackets, just and only as it deals with the actual PIAA playoffs. So not those district playoffs like the WPIAL or District 10, but only the PIAA state tournament. And then at the very end, the one bracket of the public schools and the other bracket of the private schools will come together, and they will play and call it a Super Bowl or a final championship game in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We also wanted to make sure this was not just about trophies. This legislation is not just about trophies and rings and banners. This is also about making sure that students are protected. This eliminates the transfer rule, making students immediately eligible for play after transferring schools if he or she meets other eligibility requirements. And we know that this has been inconsistently enforced. While the PIAA and the districts have tried to do their best, there's so many mitigating factors that are there, and students are being hurt and harmed, not only athletically, but oftentimes academically, because they're not, when they try to transfer schools, they realize they can't play at a certain place, they may transfer back. We're eliminating that and taking that away to make sure that we're putting students in the best position to succeed, both athletically as well as academically. The other thing that it does is we've seen issues across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania where private schools and Catholic schools are being blackballed or shut out of regular season play. We have some very stringent pieces in this legislation that ensure that that doesn't happen, where if a team forfeits 2 or more games in a season, they would be ineligible to participate in the PIAA playoffs. That protects our Catholic school friends from being blackballed or shut out of regular season games. We wanted to make sure that that happens because every student athlete ought to have the opportunity to play and learn the great life lessons that come from athletics. We focused on the team sports where we believe that the best impact could be made. The bill also allows for separate bracket championships in the future should some sports gain in significant popularity. So if there are at least 50 public schools and 50 private schools that are participating in a sport, the PIAA would then have the ability to put this system in place. Lastly, it increases fairness on the PIAA district committees to ensure that each district accurately reflects the makeup of schools in that given area. I'm going to turn it over to some of our colleagues that we've worked with through this entire legislative process. And then at the very end, I'll come up and we'll answer whatever questions you have. So at this point, from the Pennsylvania Catholic Conference, I'd like to introduce my very good friend and partner in this project, Mr. Eric Phelan. Eric? Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much. Representative Bernstine, representatives of the public schools, thank you very much for all joining us today. I think the representative hit it on the head for us. This is about academics, and this is about athletics, and this is about fairness. We care about the kids. We want to make sure that all the kids across the Commonwealth have an equal and fair opportunity to participate in sports, to play in sports. I've already started getting emails. I've already started receiving phone calls. The press corps is excellent. You've started reporting on this before we even had the press conference, some of you. So I've already started getting questions and concerns from people. And I understand that. This is a big change. And we've worked very, very hard together. This has been a fantastic partnership between the public schools, the legislature, and the private schools to put this together. But change can be scary. Please don't make any snap judgments or any snap decisions until you get a chance to fully take a look at the legislation. I think we've made a lot of very, very positive steps in this bill to help protect all of our student athletes from all of our different schools, whether they're public or private. This is about the kids. It's what we've cared about. It's what we've always cared about. We'll work through all the issues. We'll get all the questions answered. But I think at the end of the day, people are going to be very happy with the work that we've done in partnership with one another. I'm not going to stand up here and talk all day, so I want to introduce one of my co-partners on this, Bill Hall, William Hall. He's a co-state coordinator of the Pennsylvania Athletic Equity Steering Committee, and he's superintendent of Mill Creek Township School District.
Thanks. Morning, everyone. A little over a year ago, I participated in a conference call with a few school district superintendents to organize a grassroots effort to bring about much-needed change to the PIAA playoff tournament structure. At the conclusion of that conference call, we agreed to form the PIAA Equity Steering Committee and arranged for a PIAA Equity Summit meeting that was held last July in State College, PA. Our goal was simple: to establish a separate playoff system in order to level the playing field for everyone across the state. Our efforts to accomplish this within the existing PIAA governance structure were unsuccessful. And on December 11, 2018, we received a letter from the PIAA which stated the following: the PIAA Board of Directors recommends that the PA Equity Group, the Pennsylvania Catholic Conference, and the Pennsylvania Charter School Coalition attempt to work in unison to find common ground within their respective groups in providing proposals for consideration that are consistent with the intent of Act 219 and further aids in establishment or revision of policies for the betterment of all student athletes. We stand here today having completed this task with the introduction of House Bill 1600. I would like to thank Representative Bernstine, Mr. Eric Failing, and my state coordinating partner, Superintendent Leonard Rich, for your collaboration and persistence in drafting legislation that provides playoff equity and fair competition for all high school students within our Commonwealth. I would also be remiss if I didn't recognize Superintendents Eric Zelenko, Jason Moore, and John Sarandria, and Attorney Larry Kelly for their help in our cause. At this time, I'd like to introduce my partner, Mr. Leonard Rich, who is the superintendent of the Laurel School District.
Thank you. The Parity and Interscholastic Athletics Act will impact hundreds of thousands of students across the Commonwealth. It has been an honor and a privilege to work with public school superintendents, with Representative Aaron Bernstine and his team, most significantly Abby and Nick, with Eric Failing and Sean McAleer of the Pennsylvania Catholic Conference, and my partner, Mr. Bill Hall. The Parity Act is a positive correction to a problem that has evolved since 1972. All parties here today have the best interests of students at heart. The reason why this legislation is different is due to the partnership and cooperation of all the stakeholders represented at this conference. We, meaning the public schools, the Pennsylvania Catholic Conference, and the legislature, came with a spirit to get something done. Thank you. Oh, I took them all, didn't I?
Okay, so happy to answer any questions that you folks have, and fire away. Yes, sir.
Based on what Mr. Hall just said, it sounds like the PIAA asked you guys to do this. Give us something.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And I believe in your packets there's a letter, and if not, we can provide that to you later, that talks where the PIAA sent out a letter and said that we should get these groups together and work out a compromise. And the partnership of what we've done with the groups that for so long have not been on the same side, and we brought them together. And, you know, I think it's a credit that the first time we sat down, like I said, there were many, many, many issues that we all agreed on. And, you know, you just have to sit down, I think, and talk to people and understand what are the things that are top of mind. And the thing that I'm most proud about is every single time when we sat down and had a conversation, every single time, the folks behind me and the people in their groups that are behind me, the focus was always on the students. Students, students, students. It was never about protecting their own kingdom or fiefdom or whatever that is. It was really about making sure that we were protecting students, and that's a great framework to start from.
Mr. Failing, is it? Every other time I've been at one of these things, your organization has been as opposed to this as it's possible to be. What changed? Thanks.
That's an excellent question. You know, I took over as executive director for the Pennsylvania Catholic Conference about a year ago. I took over in June. Before that, I was director of social concerns, so I was a lobbyist on social issues. What changed? We just want to make sure that all kids are treated fairly. There have been issues, and we all know that there are issues in sports. We all know there are issues with the PIAA. Not the PIAA's fault. They try to do everything as best as they can. But there are issues. So when we had the invitation from the good representative to sit down and work on this issue, it's exactly what we wanted to do. We don't close our door to anybody. If anybody wants to talk to us about any issue, we're happy to come in and see if we can reach a compromise.
Was putting the charter schools with the publics critical to your going along with it?
I'm not going to say it was critical to us going along. The charter schools are public. I mean, that's in the code. So.
Eric, I'm sorry.
Popular today.
With all due respect, we've spoken to Sean numerous times on this.
Sure.
And he, representing your organization, has been adamant that in no way would there be separate playoffs. And he was not shy about threatening a lawsuit should that come. So seriously, what changed in your mind?
I think when you take a look at the legislation, it's more than just separate playoffs. That is a component of the bill, but there are a lot of pieces to this bill. As the representative mentioned, we're going to eliminate all transfer rules with the exception of mid-season transfers. Catholic schools and private schools can no longer be kicked out of separate leagues. We can no longer be blacklisted or blackballed out of regular season play, so we're guaranteed games. I mean, we have some schools, especially in rural areas, they need teams to play, right? And if we have teams that are refusing to play us, that hurts our kids. And nobody wants that to happen. So we came together and we struck a compromise. There's some misinformation that seems to be spinning around out there that especially some of our smaller, our rural schools, the private schools, won't have anyone to play. They'll have to travel too far. It's not the case. So we're guaranteed that we're going to have more regular season games. We still go to districts just like we always have. Whoever wins districts, that's the only time when the separate championships actually take place. So all public schools are going to be guaranteed a playoff championship. All the privates will be guaranteed a playoff champion as well. And then we just come together at the end for a statewide championship. So I think there's a lot of good trade back and forth. See, now you're making me feel guilty because I'm not letting these guys talk.
You're fine.
You're central to this story.
Yeah, the boss throwing me under, that's okay.
The fear of the forfeit rule.
Yeah.
Have your schools, and I'm assuming this is when you're in leagues with public schools, have your schools experienced some blowback there that league rivals don't want to play each other in league play?
We've had some issues where there's some teams that just didn't want to play ours.
Because in a non-league setting, of course, schools they would just choose not to schedule you in the first place.
Right. Well, and one of the other points I'll make about this legislation, when it comes to the actual playoff, the split playoffs, right now the PIAA sets who's going to play who. They set the brackets for the playoffs. Sometimes we're in situations where we have first round where a Pittsburgh school is playing a Philadelphia school. That's a cost for the driving. Under this piece of legislation, those separate playoffs brackets will be set separately. So the private schools will set their own playoff brackets. The public schools will set their own playoff brackets.
I'm reading from the bill. There shall be an equal number of public and non-public schools in each inter-district playoff system. 85% of the schools in the state are publics. Probably more than 85 if you include. So this means I'm reading that to mean a much greater percentage of private schools will qualify for states.
Well, again, we have separate playoffs now. So you're going to have a private school playoff champion. You're going to have a public school playoff champion. And then the winners of those two championships will come together for a statewide. Did you want to talk?
If there's 32 teams in the private state bracket,
Yeah.
and 32 teams in the public state bracket, that means a much greater percentage of private schools are qualifying for states. I'm just saying.
Yeah, that's correct. But and I think the reason that we came to that was the following. We thought that people should have to win a certain number, the same number of games to achieve that state championship. So what we didn't think was fair, and this was from both sides when we all talked about it together, was if there were 16, I'm just making up a number here, but 16 teams in one side of the bracket and 4 in another, right? We don't think you should be able to win just 2 games or so and get to that point. So, ultimately, what I see that as is more kids are getting an opportunity to play in the final for a state championship. And I think anytime you're giving more student athletes an opportunity to go and learn from those experiences, remember, so few actually end up making a living at this, right? These are about the life lessons that these folks are able to learn, these young people are able to learn. We're just giving more people an opportunity.
At the district level, the publics and privates will compete against each other?
That's correct. So there'll be no change at that district level.
So if the top 6 teams are public schools, and the 7th and 8th are private schools, 7 and 8 will be guaranteed to go to the state playoffs in their bracket.
Yeah, that'll exactly. I mean, in summary, yes, but you know, that component will be up for the PIAA to figure out on exactly how that works, and we've put in there where the Catholic school, or I say Catholic, but the non-public schools, as nearly all of them are Catholic schools, and then the public schools, they'll have the opportunity to work and talk about that through the PIAA governance process.
What will the transfer structure look like now? That's been obviously a contentious issue in this conversation since it began. So by removing this through legislation, what would that look like then? Would it revert to what it used to be? Would there be some new stipulations or anything put in place, or how would that look moving forward?
Sure. In the exact and specific language is there in the bill, but in summary is what it does. It basically eliminates that transfer rule, okay? Where students have the ability to transfer from one school to another. And, you know, I think it's important that students and parents are able to make a decision that's best for them. And I'll tell you, some of these stories that I have heard about students that are unable to participate in a sport are sickening. And some of these things are very simple, where if it's a bowling thing, I mean, I heard a story where you know, a transfer at a certain time, somebody isn't able to play for no reason other than decisions that adults have made. And I don't think that's fair to students. So what we did with this now, if it's in season, they have to transfer before 50% of those regular season games are played in order to transfer, unless there are those extenuating circumstances. We never want to hurt kids that are, you know, moved for an economic reason, or their parent serves this great nation and moved for military reasons. So there are some stipulations in there, but in summary, pretty much we're basically eliminating the entire thing. We don't want to hurt kids anymore. That it's been done for far too long.
I'd like Rich or Bill to address the transfer issue, either or both. There are no rules. This opens it up greatly, and that one of the issues of your equity conference was private schools loading up with transfers. This seems to completely open the door.
Well, as far as transfers go, if you look, there have been rules on the books, whether it's the new rule or the old rule, but the only thing that has been consistent is inconsistent enforcement, inconsistent interpretation. So depending upon the district, depending upon where you were, you could have similar circumstances and different rulings. As far as the loading up, if you will, we're going to separate playoffs. So we believe that if we're all on the same playing field and we're competing with similar types of schools, remember, in order to be a public school, they're still going to have to meet the enrollment guidelines of that public school. You know, most of those guidelines are geographic. Some allow for non-resident student enrollment. But the transfer rule and the inconsistency of the transfer rule, in my opinion, wasn't worth the effort. Mr. Hall?
Yeah, I would just, you know, in summary, the issue has been that you know, for the publics, that the privates have been able to build up athletic powerhouses with the transfer, and come playoff time, those public schools that go into the first and second round get bounced early, right? With the separation of playoffs, those private schools will start to play other schools that have that same recruiting advantage. And for us in the public sector, we're going to have some schools that are going to come in first and second round and play on a level playing field and maybe move along to the first or second, or, you know, hopefully to the state level.
But how does this address the inconsistency of enforcement that you just talked about, Mr. Rich?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, I can handle that from a legislative standpoint. It's very clear, and by Pennsylvania statute, the PIAA would be bound by Pennsylvania statute for what we have are on the transfer rules. So it really makes it where there was wide disparity in enforcement. You will no longer have that due to the statute that will happen when we pass House Bill 1600. Yes, sir.
Obviously, there's consensus among the group here, and you mentioned the education committee. What's your sense of timing? Is this something you think is going to sail through fast track in June, or what is your?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So worked very closely with Kurt Sonny, chairman of the Education Committee. My intention and ask will be that this bill moves very quickly, and I think that Chairman Sonny will do so. We've also been working very closely with the leader's office, and they've committed to help us with this process as well. They were all brought in to this. This isn't a couple people that went rogue here. This is about, we brought really everybody to the table you could imagine in order to have these conversations. Everybody was invited.
Do you have any sense of whether or not the Senate's going to move it?
We'll see. You know, my guess is the following, where when you have something where all sides are on board, the public will be, is pretty darn on board with this, that the Senate will do its job and impose the will of the people. Yes, sir.
Again, I'd like to address this to Rich or Bill. So there will be separate state playoffs for publics and privates, and then the two champions will meet. In the public's eye, that overall champion will be considered the state champion. One of your main points at the beginning was that your public schools did not have a fair chance to win a state championship. Explain your thoughts on that. I mean, this
is easy. Pennsylvania public schools will be able to compete against other Pennsylvania public schools and hang a state championship banner. They will be crowned the Pennsylvania public school champion. And we felt that was a good compromise with this organization and with this working group. We will have public school state champions.
But my point is, I understand you'll have a banner, but if your state champions lose that final game in the public view across the state, or is your school going to be viewed as the state champion?
I don't think it'll tarnish the championship. I think it is what it is, and people understand the ground rules. You know, when it comes to that last game, if you will, you have two champions playing off. If you look at the round ball in Pittsburgh or some other post-championship tournaments that wrestlers participate in. There are some other types of tournaments they participate in beyond the state championship. But in our minds, and as far as the state equity committee is concerned, we will be able to hang banners, Pennsylvania public school champions, and that's very important to us.
And I would add to that, I think it's going to bring back some excitement to the state playoff championship game, in that because you are going to have a public school state champion, that those smaller communities that follow their homegrown talent, I think you're going to see an increase in participation and people attending those games. And then I think that game at the end is going to be a very popular one, because as we all know, anything can happen in one game. The issue is with the separation, that the field is level between the public school districts and the privates. And that's what we were looking for all along. Just level the playing field come playoff time, give both sides a chance to hang a banner, and then play a game at the end.
Look, at the end of the day, there have been more arguments over high school athletics in this state than any of us can recall. Am I right? Let's stop arguing about kids' sports. These kids want to go out, they want to have a good time, they want to learn important life lessons about winning and defeat and how to handle both as ladies and gentlemen. That's what we should be focused on. Just let the kids play. That's what we're trying to do here today.
I have time for one more.
Do you have across the aisle support on this yet? And if not, are you expecting to have that soon? I mean, where are you at in terms of working with anybody else?
Yeah,
on this
so-
matter? 'Cause- sorry.
No, go ahead.
Because Rep. Conklin, most of us, I think, were in State College when he
Yeah.
brought his legislation forward. So I'm just curious, does this obviously is much a wider scope, I guess you could say, than what that legislation seemed to be. So can you just tell us where you are on that front from the actual legislative perspective of it?
Sure, I'll talk about it in general, and then I'll get a little bit more specific on it. So, from working with this, I'll tell you, we've kept this pretty much under wraps, besides the people that were representing the folks. And the reason why is, I didn't want to have the fight in the media. I didn't want to have the fight from people that weren't necessarily informed on all the issues and what was happening. And it was great to work with this group. And I don't think there was a week that we didn't collectively talk at least 3 or 4 times, right? It helps that I become good friends with these folks too. So we talk about other stuff. So, you know, this isn't out. This hasn't been out yet. We just put out the co-sponsor yesterday. I have quite a couple co-sponsors on it now. I'm not sure how many. We'll be sending out the letter where both the groups that represent hundreds of thousands of students are supporting the legislation. I'm sure we'll get more co-sponsors on that. And I'll share with you why this legislation is different than maybe Representative Conklin's. We wanted to bring everybody together and have all stakeholders at the table that represented every single student across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. This wasn't about just sending it out there and talking about something in without being specific. We really wanted to make sure that we did that.
But is the PIAA, like, they've read this and they're on board?
Yeah, so we sent the information to the PIAA through the process. We've had general conversations with them. Obviously, they have or will have this language as soon as I'm done. The final piece of the language came out. We actually just put those in the folder, so if they're still warm, they're literally right off of the copy machine press. You see Nick and Abby back there, their arms are a little tired from plugging those things in. But here's the thing, we're willing to talk to the PIAA about this. They were welcome to the table before, and we had those general conversations. Remember though, we did exactly what the PIAA requested that we do. So I'm gonna wrap it up there. Thank you guys so much for coming out, and feel free, all my contact information is on there. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to us. Thank you so much for coming today.